everybody, and welcome back to my channel for this Sunday morning, afternoon or evening across the world where you may be at. And today I watched this prison documentary in Indiana State about a 14-year-old lad who had special needs who was trapped in a maximum security prison, and it was on the Real Stories channel 21 hours ago. It's currently had 21,312 views. As a autistic, legally disabled woman, I know I'm from the UK, so my input won't be as valid as someone else probably across the pond in the US who has more knowledge on this front than me, but I want to cover it as a autistic woman, autistic disabled adult. And the prisoner name is Justin. In 2009, he was in a maximum juvenile prison on one-on-one worker support. He was listed as having severe developmental disabilities with an IQ level of 40, which is 40. He was told he needed 24-hour medical care. His level of functioning was reduced. He had a terminology put against him that he had neurodevelopmental and intellectual disability issues, but yet was found out he should not have been put in a maximum juvenile prison. He was in prison because he had nowhere else to go. So to me, this again is very sad. This again is down to lack of training, lack of care, lack of compassion, lack of resources and services available across the US and here in the UK as well when it comes to intellectual and developmental, mentally challenged, disabled people. So this again was the first thing that I found really sad and a red flag. Why wasn't he, when he was in the maximum juvenile prison, why wasn't there a assessment done on him where they could assess whether he'd go into a adult community group or whether there was an alternative group? It took another 2 years before he was moved into the Daymar facility in the US, where he spent 4 years before being adopted by a mentor from the group home. But he was put under the Department of Corrections, and that prison where he was at, the juvenile prison, the other inmates knew he had disabilities and took advantage of it, which again is very common here in the UK. When inmates find out that other prisoners have mental disabilities or intellectual disabilities, they are prime targets for being beaten and having their commissary and things stolen from them. The fact that he wasn't represented by a jury in his court hearing when he went to prison, that should have happened. He should have had someone to stand up for him and defend him and read him his rights. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So he was sent to the Department of Corrections juvenile prison, where he then later struggled with night terrors, eating problems, loud noises problems. He then was transferred to the Daymar facility by the Department of Education, which again still had lack of resources and cost the US government quite a bit of money from what they're mentioning in the documentary. During Justin's time at the Daymar facility, Justin has access to a swimming pool, basketball courts. The staff at Daymar have tried to contact Justin's family, but sadly without any success. They then stated that between 60 to 75% of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities enter the criminal justice system. I don't understand why that is such a high statistic. If someone in the US could let me know why that is such a high statistic. That's quite shocking to me that 60 to 75% of your people with intellectual or neurodevelopmental or physically developmental disabilities end up within the criminal system. One thing that I did find a bit of another red flag as well with this documentary was that the fact they kept calling him kiddo, which to me is very patronising. It's very infantile. It's like they were talking to him like he was a child. Yes, I gather that he had the mental knowledge of someone in their IQ in their 40 of the range of 40, but again, keep calling him kiddo. It's like, oh hey kiddo, oh well done kiddo, oh you've done that really well kiddo, and it's really patronising. You should treat him as a human. That's a way to really demean him and make him feel small and to make him feel even more naive than who he really potentially is. So that doesn't sit well with me at all as someone who's autistic or neurodevelopmentally disabled. The fact that he was told that being in that prison was making him worse than better. I totally agree. I think he should never ever have been placed in that prison to begin with. I think it was completely inappropriate and the wrong thing to be doing. But again, this boils down to people with disabilities needing inclusion, acceptance, and part of this is down to training and funding, which is money and time for officers and the support staff who work within the prisons and the Department of Corrections and the adult and children group home facilities that are available in the US. Sadly, we don't have them such things here in the UK, so there is better facilities and care in the US than there is in the UK for people like myself. Transferring him to a group home was teaching him independence and learning to prepare for future adulthood. But again, putting him into a group home with other severely disabled people could have stalled his development, could have made him more anxious due to these night terrors and feeling frightened. I think, again, this comes down to the improvements of each group home is different, and each staff member who he had to get readjusted to and get to know for the first time can really overwhelm someone who is neurodevelopmentally disabled and, again, has that intellectual IQ of 40, which is very low for someone of his age and someone who had disabilities such as his. Luckily, he was taken on side by the guy called Mike Dempsey, who worked for the Department of Corrections and the Department of Education, who saw that Justin was not meant to be in that prison unit and fought his corner and stood up for him and managed to get him the place at Daymar where he learnt to be around other people similar to him and getting the appropriate staff care and support to teach him future living and independence and how to look after himself. Unfortunately, Justin does not have any family from what I'm aware. The documentary did try and chase his parents on more than one occasion and no one got back to him, but the end result of the documentary was that Justin was then spent 4 years in this adult group home, and the offence that he was originally jailed for to put him in the maximum security prison was entirely made up by members of his family so that they wouldn't have to care for him. After 4 years of being in that group home, he was adopted by a member of the mentor who was in the group home, was associated with it, and he managed to get to move in with them and has had a very home, happy, settled life from what I've watched on the documentary, and it's given him purpose, the independence, trust, love, comfort, safety, and given him somewhere where he can feel safe. And I think one thing I would point out from this as well is that disabled people deserve a home. We deserve love, respect, care, compassion. We should never, ever, 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 ever be put in a place like a maximum security prison, regardless of what offence we may have done, what potential things that we made on outside of the prison. Putting someone with neurodevelopmental and intellectually developmental disabilities in a maximum security prison is not good enough. It should never have happened. That kind of place is for people who are worse risk offenders and should not be mixing with people who are seen as weaker and have the possibility of getting taken advantage of and put as targets. And that scares me because people with disabilities sadly are still being put in mainstream prisons. They are still being put in the general population, and that does panic me because if they're around the general population within the prison environment, there's going to be hell breaking loose. I think also it can cause, there'll be more injuries. People with disabilities like him, like Justin, are prone to being attacked and having their stuff stolen, and unfortunately they are people who don't defend themselves or can't defend themselves because they can't communicate properly, they can't express their wishes to how they wish to be treated, or they won't tell people what's happened to them if they have been attacked or be made to be silenced or anything. And that does scare me because I'm lucky that this person, Justin, has had such a good result after being in the Department of Corrections for such a long time and having the appropriate people take care of him and support him and make sure that his growth and independence were looked after and his human rights were adhered to at all times. And I think sadly this is down again to what it comes to training, money, it comes down to lack of family being around some disabled people, because some family, especially within the US, I've noticed, and within the UK, if they have severely disabled people, they find it easier to give them up to the care system, which isn't the right thing to be doing. But I know some parents sadly feel they have no choice, or they feel it's the best outcome for their son, daughter. You know, I'm not saying that these people are bad, I'm just saying that sadly a lot of these children, young adults, adolescents, older adults with these kind of disabilities are being given up to the care system, and there is nowhere to put them, there is no way to care for them or support them, and they often end up in trouble, end up behind bars, or end up in group homes being restricted because they're not trusted in the wider community to be active members. And that does upset me, because people with disabilities like Justin, like many others across the world, here in the UK, in the US, Canada, elsewhere, across the world where you may be at, you know, we need to take care of people with disabilities, because yes, we may be considered weaker than, or we may be considered, you know, vulnerable or at risk of being hurt or harmed, but again, it's down to having the staff understand you and understand your different ways of communicating. And I think as soon as we can get that relationship built up with someone that we can trust inside the group home or inside the prison, it'll make our time more secure and enjoyable, I guess. But I know prison's not enjoyable. I'm not saying it's going to be enjoyable, but for people who should not be put in there, this will be a great way of making it more easier of a transition for them. I hope you've enjoyed my thoughts on this documentary. I had to make this video. I'm very, very passionate about the subject of people with neurodiversity, neurodevelopmental and intellectual disability, as obviously I am neurodevelopmentally disabled myself, and I will link the documentary down below in the video description box. And please like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, and thank you for watching. Bye!